biggest struggle in retirement is just purpose. What am I going to do with my days? But there were a lot of women who just absolutely did not know what to do. And they don't want to retire to just a lazy boy chair playing a solitaire game on their iPad and watching the news. Like, that's not what they're looking for. I think there's a lot in, for women specifically, is understanding when we're not working and we're not in the high cortisol state, taking care of all of our kids, like, then what? What will we do then?
Welcome to Reward, the podcast of The Trust. We are the show specifically for women entrepreneurs who want to build businesses into the multi-million-dollar revenues and beyond, but especially because we know the reward is much greater than that. I'm Allie Brown, and I'm excited to introduce you to these diverse female leaders from a variety of industries, women making huge impact and who are unwilling to settle for the status quo. On the web, visit jointhetrust.org to learn more about our modern community for forward-thinking 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. That's jointhetrust.org. See you there. Now, get ready to enjoy this episode's powerful conversation. Suzanne, where are you today?
Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah. You live quite the life. I kind of envy that you can go between there and Florida. It's a nice lifestyle.
It's on purpose. Yeah.
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 A lot of what you have designed in your business and life is very on purpose, which I was so impressed with when I met you. And, and then to see what you've created but then to hear about your background and, where you came from and a lot of the challenges that you endured, I think I'd like to start there if that's okay. Sometimes I don't, but to go back and if you could tell everyone a bit about, your childhood, your family, and how that led you to really deciding, you made a really conscious decision to design your life in a certain way.
I did. And it started all the way at the beginning. So yeah, I grew up in a trailer park, literally outside of Detroit. My mom, single mom, amazing person, good soul, 10th grade education, and was a bartender, oldest of 3. We barely made ends meet. Most of the time we were having some utility bill shut off. So when I was really young, I was a little overweight and we didn't have any money for any extracurricular activities. So we pretty much just hit the library. And I would read all kinds of books, just anything, everything from like calligraphy to signing to money, just whatever. It was mostly nonfiction stuff that I tended to read. And I was reading a book about like essentially like passive income. And I remember going to my mom and saying, Mom, why aren't we living off of our interest? Why are we living off our principal? And she didn't even know like what those words meant. She like, who are you? Like, what are you talking about? Like, like we're just paycheck to paycheck. And I'm like,
Oh, how old were you?
Oh gosh, I was like 11, 12.
Where did you even read about that?
Yeah. I was reading at like a ridiculous level when I was a kid. I was
Wow.
always like, all those math tests had me in the 99th percentile. They would never move me up a grade, but they always gave me like special services. And so when I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean we're paycheck to paycheck? 'Cause I didn't understand that like being in a trailer park and a single wide trailer meant that we didn't have the means. Like I didn't know like what normal average, was. And she was like, I just don't have, we don't have any money. And I'm like, okay, how am I getting a car when I'm 16? She's like, you're gonna have to buy. I'm like, okay, wait, how am I gonna get to college? And she said, you're gonna have to get a scholarship. I'm like, okay, wait, huh? I was so confused. I immediately rolled into my 8th grade teacher. So maybe I was 13 at the time, my 8th grade counselor, and said, I just found out I don't have any money. Like, I have to get a scholarship. What do I need to do?
I have news.
Yeah, like I was shocked. Maybe he knew the whole time. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And we literally went backwards and created my entire 12th grade, like senior year curriculum to where I'd be all in AP classes. And, you have to work backwards to get that to that class, to that class, to that class, so that when I went into 9th grade, I was taking the correct classes to get me all the way. And then subsequently, he also said, okay, you're also going to need to be in like clubs. You need to do after school stuff. You need to get on a sports team. So I threw shot and discus and track because I was big and there's not much else I wanted to do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did discus, and listen. I weigh less now than I probably did in like fifth grade. I was 5'9" and probably, I don't know, over 200 pounds, and so I was big. And because I was big, I was really good at shot put and discus. Because back then in the early 90s, kids weren't big. Being big was not normal. I was an anomaly. I was the big kid. And so I was really good at it. I actually got all the way to state, but then some of the Detroit girls just really, really had their act together. So I didn't.
It's tough. That tough competition. That is
It was very,
talk to you. Every time I talk to you, we've had dinners together and wine, and every time I talk to you, I learn something new. Discus.
yes, we're shot and discos, and all this stuff was on purpose so that when you go to do college applications, you look like a well-rounded person. It's one thing when you just look smart, but it's another thing when they think you're going to contribute and eventually maybe even be an alumni who donates back, right? So I applied to a couple schools. I got a full ride in Miami and Florida. I got a partial scholarship to UCLA. But what I didn't realize, because I really did want to go to Florida, to Miami, I was a big Hurricanes fan, was that they were still private and I was out of state. And so logistically, with the money I get for free, like the Pell Grants and all that stuff, I still couldn't afford it. So I ended up at Wayne State, which is a Detroit school for computer engineering. And I had enough money at that point to I think they even direct deposited a couple $1,000s to my bank account at the front end of every semester just to get me, through gas and groceries. But yes,
Mhm.
it was very meticulous and on purpose because no offense to my mom, but I saw what 10th grade got her. And yes, she worked hard, but I looked at some of the things she did and I just went, okay, I love these things about her. I'm going to model that, but I don't like these things about her. So I'm not going to model that.
Yeah.
I've got to get out of here. And
Yeah. So you were
yeah,
reverse engineering your success even at the age of 13.
yes, yes. And sad to say that my sister did not, my brother did not. So they also didn't make it past 10th grade. But yeah, I had to. And unfortunately, my mom was so uneducated that even when it came to doing the FAFSAs, I had to do them. I actually had to file her tax returns for her because she had never filed tax returns before. So I had to get tax returns filed in order to do the FAFSAs for her. Like I had to do everything in order to get out of there. It was it was a lot.
And what made you want more? Did you see people with more, or you just learned that because you when you realized you had less, you wanted more? Like was there a tipping point?
It's a good question. So she's the youngest of eight. And out of the eight, there were two that were kind of flailing, my mom and a brother, two that were in the mid range, and then three of them that were, quite successful. And the three that were quite successful, one was a business owner, one actually lives in Scottsdale and was like a big Bank of America exec. They had all went to college and they were like the people I talked to over Christmases and in the summer to where they were telling me, like almost like my dad, because I didn't have a dad. They were telling me like this is what you need to do and this is what you've got to
Mm.
do. Like again, no offense to your mom, but you don't want to be in the trailer park. You're better than that. So my uncle Bruce, who ran a bunch of Domino's pizza stores, and my uncle Rick were really instrumental in just communicating to me all the things they had done, to get out of where they grew up, which was a very rough part of Detroit. So I just took it and ran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And when did you make the connection that you wanted to be in finance in some way?
As I was working at Wayne State or, going to Wayne State, I still had to waitress, to pay the bills because I lived on my own, rent, all the stuff. And I worked with a waitress who, and this was at Chi Chi's. I love working at Chi Chi's. It's temptation. Stop to me. I made more money there than at any place ever, and everyone was so happy because chips and salsa and happy hour margaritas, like it really was a great place to work. But I worked with a lady in her 40s who didn't have health insurance, had three kids, is very paycheck to paycheck. Now a lot of restaurants do actually offer benefits, but at the time they were not. And she just said, "Hey, I know this is good money, but like don't be 40, working at Chi Chi's." I was like, "Don't worry, I'm in college. Like, I don't plan to. This is a temporary situation." She said, I said the same thing. So I ended up taking a job based on her advice as a teller at a small bank in Michigan and worked my way up to an assistant branch manager within a year. Then I ended up moving to Huntington with the guy I was dating at the time, got a job there as an assistant branch manager, and noticed this girl walking in the door who was Gucci'd out, drove up in a Mercedes SUV, and I just was like, "Who is?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, her
I'll have
name's
what she's
Anna."
having.
Yeah, she's a financial advisor. I'm like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Oh, she does, like, investments if, anyone comes in with, like, big deposits and, like, there's this whole referral program that Bank One Chase has you do." And I said, "Interesting." And I noticed, I said, "The branch manager was tied to the desk, stressed about the P&L all the time. The mortgage officer, always at the desk, on the phone, always stressed." And Anna would roll in, maybe have 2 appointments, roll out, and she clearly made more money than anyone, and I just was like, "Whatever that is, I'm doing." Like, not only
I
was
love
it
it.
money, but it was freedom. She was never stuck at that desk, and I just was like, "Wow." And so I got licensed, became a banker. So at Chase, they get you securities license to be a banker. Started selling investments as a banker under Anna. And then when I moved to Lexington back in 2006, I became a financial advisor with Chase at the time. And I mean, that was it. That was my end game. And then it's just a matter of growing your business, growing your business, growing, 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 which,
Yeah.
you know,
You just reminded me of, when my last job, I was at an ad agency, and this was in New York in my late 20s. And I loved it because it was a small office. So I got to do everything. The owners were gone all the time. I kind of took it over and ended up running it. I'm like supervising these like 55-year-old men. And I loved it. But then I saw this freelancer coming and going, and he was always like tan from the Hamptons. I saw his invoices. He made more money and he did some of the things that I was doing. And I'm like, how do I do what you do? He's like, oh, there's all these ad agencies and, they need freelancers. And he's like, I know you write copy and you could do marketing. And he's like, a lot of these small agencies don't want full-time people. I was so excited, but your awareness has to shift. But once it's shifted, you can't go back. Like, that possibility's there. And
Mhm.
also my number one value has always been freedom. And I heard you say freedom. It's so important to you. And that I know whenever I've gotten resentful about something I've built, even if it's what I wanted, it's the freedom that is the restlessness where I've built something around you. And it's cool that what you've built now still echoes what you knew at that moment, that freedom was important to you.
It was huge. And then in financial advising, wealth management is like, I tell this to a lot of people. This is, kids, college kids, people picking my brain. I've always got someone in my calendar every week that wants to pick my brain about finance. It is probably one of the only business models where you get recurring revenue in perpetuity for a relationship that you started, as long as you're keeping them happy. Unfortunately, realtors are not paid a trail. Unfortunately, mortgage officers are not paid a trail. I wish they were. Honestly, I talked like this to realtors often. Imagine if you were paid 0.10 for every house you've ever closed for the rest of your life. It would change your whole business model. So I don't have to wake up every day, starting from scratch. I have to keep my clients happy, of course, add value, provide the services that they're paying for. But logistically, it's a very special business that I had no idea even existed until I met Anna. And then, working at JP Morgan for almost 10 years, I realized that it would be silly to be in it in any other business.
Yeah.
I love it. And thankfully, once I left Chase, I did, really quantify what freedom meant. Because, of course, you're pretty much tied to a branch operating schedule as a financial advisor. It was nights, weekends, all the things. But when I left there in 2012, I really was able to like create the rest of the business that I wanted to create
Mm.
for my daughter, who's going to be 16 on Sunday, and for myself. Being a mom, I didn't want to just pawn her off to daycare like I had to at Chase, drop her off at 8, pick her up right before 6. She was always like the last kid there.
Mhm.
She was always mad at me for that. So like that, it became really evident, when she was 3 and 4 that like, wow, I'm working a lot. And I didn't love that part of it. I loved the money. I didn't love the time commitment and the 2 weeks of vacation they give you. It would just, for me, it wasn't enough. I was like, no, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So give us a lay of the land of like what your business is now. What is the model? How do you work with people?
So I'm at Meridian Wealth. It's a local RIA. I think we're at maybe 4 billion. We have offices in Texas and California and Nashville and Florida. I think we even have one in Colorado and a couple in Arizona. It's owned by some football guys. And of course, some of the clients that are involved with Meridian are also like pro sports guys. That's not my business. My business is usually the 1 to 5 million net worth range. They worked hard for it, teachers, savers, engineers, architects, attorneys, doctors. So when you're an RIA, it's a little bit different than like JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, all those guys, they're like broker dealers. I'm an RIA. So the difference is don't get paid commissions. It's straight fiduciary. I usually either do planning for a fee, sort of like a consulting service, or I do quarterly fee that I charge on the assets that I'm managing that I then provide the planning and all the things for. There's kind of two ways I can bill. I've been at Meridian almost 9 years now. And when I moved over from Chase to Wells to Meridian, my book at the time that I moved was like roughly 30 million, which is a good size book because I charge my clients an average of
When you say book, it's the assets that you manage for clients. Okay.
correct. Yeah. So it's like your stocks, your ETFs, your mutual funds that you're typically custodied somewhere. I use Schwab. We also can use Pershing or Fidelity. I just happen to use Schwab. So when I transfer everything over, I have a particular amount of business that I'm then usually charging somewhere between like 1 and 1.2. So my average fee is in like the 1.05 range. And my book between the office in Florida that I opened plus Lexington, and this is lead services, client referrals, COI, and it's a combination of, sources. I am now my assets under management today are about 145 million, which is a very big book for one person and an assistant, which is
Mhm.
basically my business.
Would that usually be an office of people typically doing that?
Sometimes it depends on the household. I have over 200 households, so I have asked for a second assistant because I also pulled my husband into the business and he's growing a book too, and we're sharing the same full-time assistant. So it's
Yeah.
time. But for instance, we have a guy in the office who manages almost $1 billion, but he's at old Standard Oil and it's mostly family trust. And the amount of households that he's managing are far lesser. And so he also only has one assistant for $1 billion book because the amount of households are small.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a combination of how much you're managing plus the actual amount of phone calls and requests and moving pieces. But I definitely need, at this point, I need a second assistant. If we're going to grow another 100 million, which is my goal, then usually we would have at least two. So,
Mhm.
but
And then you design though the business the way you want it. Like that's the entrepreneurial part of what you do, right? Is
yes.
like you've decided that, okay, I'm gonna work this 6 months of the year and then essentially take the other 6 months off. Can you talk about how you design this that's different maybe than other people in your industry?
So it was interesting so the old Chase model, they want you calling your clients on their birthday month to meet with them at least once a year for their review. The reality, though, in Lexington, Kentucky, with the weather, is just come November, December, everyone would sort of shoo me off because of the holidays, because of family. Wealth management is not really their priority. They were just like, call us after the first, right? So my appointments would always be really light. And then in January, I would call them. And of course, because of the weather or some snowstorm or significant event, or they're cold, I would get ignored a lot and also shoot off till their tax return stuff came, till their 1099s came. And then all of a sudden, my phone was like just ringing, ringing,
Yeah.
ringing. So when I moved to Wells Fargo, so this is back in 2012, I changed the model to where March 1, we're reaching out. I send an email with a Calendly link. Hey, it's time. And I essentially do what they call surge meetings. I call it client review season, but it's now been dubbed the word surge meetings by a lot of advisor coach guys as a very efficient method to run a business. And I'm, 6 to 8 meetings in a row, 3 to 4 days a week. I schedule my Fridays off, not from clients or not from work, just client meetings. So I can catch up and pre-plan for next week. And I do this all the way through the weekend before Memorial Day. So March, April, May, meetings, meetings, meetings. Everyone's top of mind. Everyone wants to talk about it. They've set their goals, they've done the courses and they're ready to like do better, save more, whatever. All summer, I may have an occasional maintenance issue, divorce, death, new client, no problem. But otherwise, I've done all my meetings for the fall or for the spring. So then September 1, same thing, email goes out, says, hey, it's time. And I open my calendar up literally the day after Labor Day. And I'll do the same meetings. Some people I hadn't gotten in the spring. So I'll, make them come in the fall. Same thing in the fall. Sometimes I didn't get them in. I'll make them come in the spring. So not everyone's twice a year, but most of them are. And I go all the way through that Friday before Thanksgiving because the week of Thanksgiving, I'm blocked off prepping, all that stuff. So that's it. And then otherwise, other than minimum distributions, we have automated a lot of the money movements we have automated. So that stuff's already set up anyway. If there is the
Mhm.
occasional, hey, I'm going to buy a car, that kind of thing that comes up. But yeah, otherwise I'm with my kids. So I do a lot of traveling in the summer.
Yeah. Like, what has this allowed you to do, having that space?
I love to travel. If there was a purpose other than helping people, I feel like my purpose is traveling. It's where I get up early, wake up, I'm excited. I don't mind if I'm a little less sleep. So we're headed back to Mirabel for a couple days.
Oh, yeah. Are you going back to the same one we went to in
And then I'm gonna
Austin?
do the areas. I'm gonna do them all. I think I'm gonna tour them all within the next year, but this one first, just because I'm familiar with it. Trip to Florida, St. John. There's several things we've got scheduled over the summer. But then in the Christmas break, I actually just mull, hang out, chill, sip the cocoa and stare at the tree. Yes, we
Enjoy
do
it.
probably, take a weekend trip to New York or something, but it's not like heavy, heavy travel. I kind of intentionally cocoon, set my goals for the next year and sort of look at the calendar and put everything together. I really just kind of have an intentional, like really almost all of January is like just this intentional, like I'm not doing anything
Mhm.
unless I have to,
Which
which
makes sense. It's funny because we all try to be, you don't, but like January feels like this pressure, like you need to be out of the gate. And the more I tune into the energy now and feel aligned with everything, it really starts coming up more about March, which is when you start your business. It makes so much sense. It's more of that spring feeling, the fresh start, the rejuvenation. January is like crawling out of a cave. So I kind of want to go to your model. I thought a lot. Tell everybody. Yeah.
literally in a cave. I actually
Yeah.
suggest to people, like it's almost like hibernation. We were
Mhm.
a long time ago, we used to live off of fresh food, and come winter, you didn't really want the calorie burn. So you purposely were fasting, sleeping more, eating less,
Mhm.
and it's actually a whole season. If the place that you're in does have seasons, you probably have a different energy if you're in Florida because you weren't living off a farm. There's not the same agriculture there, but in Lexington, there's 4 seasons, and I absolutely sleep more, hibernate, fast, and just yes, stay in the cave until the spring where I come out going, oh, that's so good. And
I just learned that bears give birth during the hibernation. They're asleep. So they wake up skinny and with cute cubs.
really?
It's wild. I just saw that somewhere.
Listen like that.
The sleep when it happens, they wake up, there's just like cute cubs all over them and they're all, skinny from not eating all winter. So
That's so
they got
smart.
that before. Maybe there's something we can learn from nature, tuning back in. Let's talk about your cubs and your kids. You manage a lot. It's so interesting because in my career, I've heard some women, and this is more at the corporate events I've gone to. There's been women on stage that do not want to be asked about work-life balance. It's really interesting. They don't like that question. Men don't get asked that question. And I was at a particular event. It was Inc. 500 or something like that, one of those types of things. And I went up to, I could tell one of the women up there was kind of bristling at it. And I went up to later and just very gently told her, I said, you know why sometimes we still want to know that question? Because we're still figuring this out. We are. And it's a hard part of who we are as women and still wanting to be that nurturer for our family. We end up, like it or not, in charge of still so much, even with partners and great husbands. And so how do you're obviously driving the bus for a lot of stuff. How do you manage and what have you realized about yourself in the process?
Yeah, thankfully, because I am the quintessential planner, it's not difficult for me to take off 12 things all at the same time. I don't love operating in a high stress cortisol state though. So I moved my mom in. I moved down from Michigan, obviously, trailer park, had no retirement plan. I'm it. I moved her in several years ago. That was very helpful to me. She took on, some of the load, like the grocery list and the grocery shopping and, doesn't necessarily take care of my laundry, but just kept the house, somewhat in order.
Right.
I've always
Keep
had
it running.
cleaners. So cleaners are imperative to me. I cannot live without them, period. So between the house cleaners and the lawn guys and my mom, it does free me up to show up, be present. Yes, I'm definitely the car line person. I still pick my daughter up every day, even though her school is 2 minutes from my office and she promised to walk. It's not working out. So I do get to do the things I want to do, probably because I'm not committing a ton of time on, nights or weekends, keeping the house afloat. I was married in 2019 to a man that I snatched up as soon as I could find him because he was also the doer of all the things for his 4 kids. So between the two of us, we have 6 kids, 14 to 21. And now Lauren, who's the oldest, had a twin grandbaby. Like I have twin grandbabies now. So she had girls on Valentine's Day. So they're 3 months old, which has been fun and different and new. Obviously, I'm in the middle of my client review season, so I can't step in to like watch them in like a full-time capacity. But I told her I called dibs on Sundays because that's the day that I do leave free. But I have free time. And when my weekends get here, like there is nothing on my plate between the grocery shopping and click lists and deliveries and automations and the lawn people and the pool guy and the cleaners. I am not doing something that I don't want to do, especially if, like I look at it from a net, like a return on investment perspective. Like if I'm making X and I can pay someone Y, and then I have space for myself, time for my partner, time for my kids, time for my family. Like I don't even think twice about it. I've never had a hard time hiring out everything. I think my lawn guy's been with me now like 15 years. He
This is
even
interesting
plants
because,
my
sorry, go
flowers.
ahead.
Oh, yeah, he just
Oh,
plants my
yeah.
flowers. Like I love looking
Oh,
at the flowers and I love having the things, but I don't have the time to commit to planting. So he does all of it, which
yeah.
some people would want to do on their own, but just not me. So go
It's
ahead.
awesome that you just adapted right away to delegating because sometimes when people have not ever seen that in their background, it can be very hard, especially for women. But I think because you're a numbers person, you said it, it's the ROI, right? What is an hour of my time worth versus how, getting this other person to help. And then you're giving them a job too. You're helping those people. It all goes together. We're like this sisterhood
Yes.
helping other people at the same time. So I'm glad that adapted pretty well for you.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
still doing the FAFSAs and some of the appointment scheduling. Like I don't outsource. Actually, I do have a personal assistant, which I brought on last year. I don't put on the personal stuff yet. I'm really good at the travel planning and working my points and doing the things that I've been doing for years. And so it's a little bit of an uptake to try to sit down with her and do those things. But there are
Yeah.
other things I put on her that I can't necessarily put on my work assistant to do. And so I do plan, I think, to use her in a bigger capacity going forward. She's even suggested, that she would love to like run my errands and do some of the, more basic stuff. I think I just
Mhm.
need like time this summer when I have time to get her on board with
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I do a lot and because there's 6 kids and they're all states of different grades, education, cars, maintenance, vehicles, I'm
Wow.
paying most of it. Doing all of it, plus my mom. And we also have
Why?
5 dogs. So we have lots of dogs.
Why?
Yes.
Why do you have 5 dogs? I'm
One
gonna
of them
I'm
was
gonna
my
draw the line
client.
on that one.
Yeah, one of my clients passed away. I took on her dog, I promised. A couple of them we got together when we were like newly forming our adorable family that were all obsessed with each other. And so they wanted like their own dog. And then my mom had one that I, let her keep.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And she
Yeah.
again, she's the dog person as well. She takes care of all of them.
Thank
She's
goodness.
home with them. So no one's crated. Everyone's happy. She's probably in the
You
pool.
you know this could be a show. Have you ever
Yeah.
pitched pitched your life as an idea?
We're very much Brady Bunch. She's Alice right in the middle. There's 3 boys, 3 girls. It's a thing. Yeah.
It's awesome. So let's talk about, you work with a lot of female clients and especially ones at certain ages and seasons of their life. Give us some quick tips or strategies, or it could be mistakes that you see that you want to let women out there know that they may not realize they should be doing with their money or not doing with their money.
So I actually wrote a book about this. So in Florida, where I opened up a second office
Can you show
again.
it? You have it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I opened up a Florida office on purpose because I did want to spend some of that January, February cave time maybe there in better weather. But I do have a book. It's called Money
Yes.
Moves for Women Over 50.
And I thought
So
this
what
was
I was
so
finding as these new clients were coming to me from referrals, sometimes they were married and then recently divorced or recently widowed. They had never really managed the money before. I'm talking like pay the bills, not just the investment assets. A lot of times the relationships with their advisor had been with the husband, so they never even knew the guy or he was not very good at communication, sometimes condescending, all the typical, feedback that you get from the old financial advisor. And as I was going along and working with these women, they said, you should write a book. You should write a book about this, almost like a manual, because I was often repeating the same recommendations, the same types of steps, the same stuff. So in the book, the big thing that I have found with women, which isn't quite the case in the villages because they move there on purpose to do a bunch of things to live their best life. So I do feel like they've got this under control. But the biggest struggle in retirement is just purpose. What am I going to do with my days, those months, the actual year? Because there's a difference to what you can do in the summer, versus the winter, especially in Kentucky. So I have my first chapter is called Dream Big. And it really begs you to just get a piece of paper out, get your notes app out, like do something, write down, what things make you smile. Do you even do anything that makes you smile? Because if you've lived your whole life for your children and maybe now grandchildren, it's possible that you don't really have any hobbies. Some people like to knit, some people like to crochet, some people like to play pickleball. That's a thing now, tennis, golf. But there were a lot of women who just absolutely did not know what to do. And they don't want to retire to just a lazy boy chair playing a solitaire game on their iPad and watching the news. Like that's not what they're looking for. So sometimes I'm having to like sit down with people in a meeting and literally like put a pen to paper and I start throwing out ideas, talking about things that I have seen my retired clients do, anywhere from travel, cruising, hiking, to the pickleball, tennis. and then eventually it does turn into a grandkid conversation if they have them. But I think there's a lot in for women specifically is understanding when we're not working and we're not in the high cortisol state, taking care of all of our kids, like, then what? What would we do then? And
Mhm.
admittedly, I'm not the best at it because I am in that season right now personally where I don't have an opportunity to really have a hobby other than travel, but we really need to put, like, some actual intention behind it. My men clients, for the most part, are really good about knowing what they wanted to do. In fact, ironically, they had carved out some time for it throughout their life. They golf occasionally, or they go hunt, or they go on a boat, they fish. And I don't know where women along the way have decided they're just going to sacrifice all of their time and energy and not spare something for themselves. But I do notice that there's a slight
Mm.
difference
Yeah, the
between
joy, they're doing things that they for just for enjoyment that
yeah.
they love.
And that's obviously just talking specifically about the money spend. One hack, there's a couple of hacks I give people in the book. One is purely about the credit card points, working it, knowing what you're getting on each card. I had a client that would Sharpie what she got paid on the outsides of every card. So this one was 3% gas and this one was 2% restaurants. And she would literally work the card to that particular cash register, which I thought was really smart. So I also Sharpie my cards. That's something that I wish we were better at because we're really leaving money on the table if we're just swiping a debit card everywhere. But then also the concept of having a business. So even if you're employed and you're a W-2 person, having a side hustle of some sort, selling something, doing some sort of work where you can call yourself a consultant, an artist, I don't know, even Uber driving means that there's a bunch of things you get to write off and depreciate against your W-2 income or, if you're not W-2'd at all, just in general.
Mhm.
And I think when I'm really talking to people about planning, it's not so much about the money that they're making, it's more like the money they're keeping from the tax guy. So I have had a lot of clients implement some part-time work even in retirement just so that they can, keep deducting the home office. And, obviously you do need to make some money in order to do this. You can't have not been paid, but it's not typically very difficult, to find someone to pay you for your
Mhm.
work. So that's always a recommendation, which I know like the women in the trust are all business owners. So clearly they've got that handled. But for the women that are retired in the villages, who were retired teachers or retired from Procter Gamble, whatever, they were really only an employee. And so when I suggest to them that they sort of pick up a thing, maybe a little for play money, but also to save some money on their taxes, it's just like they just lose their mind. I actually had a lady who wanted to take out a big IRA distribution for industrial quilting equipment, and she was intending to sell some of this stuff on Etsy. I call up my accountant person, and I'm like, "Hey, but this client is gonna go in the business of quilting this year so that we can write off these, I mean, $15,000 each pieces of equipment that take up an entire office. They're gigantic.
Mhm.
So really, we essentially offset the entire IRA distribution with those items to where instead of having to pay, oh, I don't know, roughly $10,000 in taxes,
Mhm.
she effectively owed nothing. And I just looked like a wizard. She was like, wait, what? Like, why did that happen? And I was like,
New It was a
"Oh,
new concept for her, right? So,
yes, yeah,
yeah,
you got to work the system."
yeah. And then you work with clients in a different way than a lot of these old, when I think of the traditional advisor, it's like the old geezer, like you said, kind of, let me take care of it, honey. I've got it. It sounds like you really listen to these women, you develop relationships with them. And does that lead to a level of trust? Obviously, then they stay clients because you do well for them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the money management matters, and I do have different clients at different levels of like authority over that. Some people know exactly what stocks they have and they want more of X or Y or Z. And then I have some women who don't even want a stock. They only want mutual funds, and they kind of stick their hands in their ears and say, no, 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 I don't want any, just do it, do it, do it. Right. So there's all these stages of anxiousness around it, knowledge around it. And so I really try to have a quick conversation. Just how much can I teach you, to where every time we meet, just a little bit more, because I'm not guaranteed to be here forever. I really don't want you getting schmucked by the next guy. I want to get women as up to speed as they're willing to be, within their comfort zone before they start to just
Mhm.
tune out and get overwhelmed. And so there it's pretty varied. But aside from the money management, which is a very short conversation typically, a lot of the women are calling me about everything from their relationship issues, taking care of children. So I'm not like the Susie Orman where I'm stamping, denied or approved on every transaction, because ultimately this money is theirs and they can do what they want. But I'm often like the CFO where they're calling me saying, hey, I have this thing. I need to rescue my son from X or Y. And I'm going, well, hey, instead of taking it from this IRA, what if you look at just getting the loan or doing this? Like, here's some other ideas and ways you can maybe make him make the payment, but you're not really covering the $40,000
Mm.
car, whatever, whatever.
That's holistic kind of in
Yeah.
what your
I
approach
actually
is.
had a client in my office on, I want to say it was Thursday, and I offer Zooms. I prefer in persons because it does kind of help us connect and like hug and, build a relationship. But there's occasional Zoom meetings. I have clients in like 20 states and 3 countries, so we're not always in person. And she said that I had never heard someone say this to me like this. She said, I purposely come to see you because I'm pouring into everyone else, but you pour into me. And then I'm
Mhm.
good for 6 months until I see you again. And I
Yeah.
just was like, what? And she's like, I love being in this room because she gets to talk a little, she gets to vent a little, we get to mastermind a little, and then of course we talk about the money and what it's doing and all the things may need it for. But I had never actually heard someone say that exact word, like, you pour into me and I pour into them and this works. And I was very, very flattered. I do get good feedback from most clients that I'm different. It's better, it's special, it's,
Yeah.
more inclusive, and maybe,
I love that. I think
yeah.
that's what it should be. I wish we could talk for 2 hours, but I just looked at the time. This has gone by so quick. So we have about just a few minutes left. I'm going to switch gears for a bit. Can you, oh, before I do that, tell everybody where they can get the book and where they can learn more about you. Because ladies, you have to get this book. I thought this was not only a brilliant book with the content and how everything I read made sense. I understood it. It was just so relevant for where I am in my life right now. But also, it was a brilliant marketing strategy, which maybe we'll have to do a part two of this at some point, and you kind
Yeah.
of break down how you knew your market. The book was a big part of that. I think that'll be a juicy follow up. So,
Yeah.
where can they get the book and learn more?
The book is on Amazon. It is a bestseller. I have it on Kindle. I do have Audible now. And then, of course, the hard copy. And it sells anywhere from like 4 to 6 copies a day. It brings me clients from all over the world. And I will tell women, write the book, but the key to writing the book is actually the interviews, where you're interviewing your ideal client who happens to not be your client. So then maybe you can book a meeting from a meeting and close some business and pay for the book before it's even written. That is like the
Mhm.
hack. So the book is out. It's on Amazon. It's called Ultimate Money Moves for Women Over 50. And if you search on Suzanne Powell, you'll find it that way.
Great. We'll put a
Um,
link to it in the show notes too.
Thank you. My website is suzannepowell.com. And I do offer a, 15 to 30-minute call for people, which is actually a bonus for the book as well. And in that 30 minutes, I'm just helping. Like, I literally just give free advice. It's not a pitch into my services. It's not a pitch into me. It's it's is whatever you need. Some people are debt, credit, score, questions stuff. Sometimes it's money, inheritance stuff. It's pretty varied.
Okay, great. You're obviously well connected. Your whole business revolves around, connecting with business owners, wealthy people, even the areas that you frequent and you live in. What drew you to becoming part of the trust with us?
I actually have been looking for a women's mastermind group for a couple of years. So I hired a pretty prominent financial advisor coach who got me into changing my packaging a little and setting up that second piece, which is just consulting for a fee and not, a for a lot of those engineer DIY guys who are really my cup of tea, but they didn't seem to ever close. And I was always so confused. She happened to be in a really popular mastermind, but it's invite only. And it's like high level, like 8+ figure women. And I was like, I could do that though. I want to be in that group. Like she wasn't suggesting that I could be in her group. So I go on to Google and I'm like, high net worth mastermind. And the trust literally popped up. Like first I said, your
That's what
guys'
you found us in Google.
your geo
I
mappings,
forgot that.
SEO was on point that day. I had never heard of Allie Brown. I had never heard of the trust. I'm not like a social media person really. I don't even turn my TV on. But I find so locally, I have some peers that are like from along the way from Chase or, from the moms groups for my daughter, but they weren't necessarily seven-figure business owner with 6 kids, with offices everywhere. Like they were not that mindset. And often when I'm in the room with them, I'm the one carrying it, pouring in, giving the ideas. And I never really had equitable relationships or support. And I wanted it to be a women's mastermind because I'm married. And I guess because anything financial advisory is like 99% men, I'm an only woman in the room. And it's just never a very comfortable experience for me. And so when I joined your group, I was actually a little anxious if I'd even get approved. So I'm like putting in my rental income and putting in my income and go, like, I promise, I made over 1 million, like I wanted it, and then Erica was like, you're in. And I was like, what? Like I was all excited. And then I got into the room and I was like, wow, I'm shook and thinking again, as an advisor, client facing, not automations or selling particular programs. I wasn't expecting to even get like as much out of the trust because I'm like a little niche, right? And instead, actually just consolidated all of the many pages of notes that I had over the several in-persons we've had into one book that I'm bringing to the summer retreat.
I love it.
So I rewrote everything and needled it in, and it helped me with hiring my assistant. It's helped me with navigating that relationship. It's helped me quantify this course that I've got done now. Like there's so much I've done because of the trust where like for the first time I'm in a room with women who are literally just like me, maybe in different businesses, but like I'm getting something out of it, not like I'm the one bringing the information and other people are getting to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very
I love
exciting.
it.
Yeah.
We've been so excited to have you and thank you for kind of cementing that value. I always love hearing from the members, because you hear, oh, it was great. It was great. And then, but the fact that you took so much value from it and you're like documenting it. It's just so cool. You're like, here are the notes and here's what I did. And I think a lot of women don't realize, when you start off in your industry, it's good to be in industry events. It's good to be surrounded by people from your industry. But when you reach a certain level, you want to be in rooms with very different types of people, very different types of models, because we are typically going to reinvent the model for our industry. That often happens. And you're going to get those ideas from different spaces and different experiences. So thank you. And then Suzanne, what is the reward in all this for you?
I think ultimately I'm in the business to help people, and that is what, when I think about every day, especially when I'm in 6, 7, 8 meetings in a row, and then walking into my house full of kids, like, why? Why would I even do this to myself, right? It's exhausting. It's like 8 little dates all in a row. And yes, there's some energy exchange, but ultimately I'm pouring in probably more than I'm getting. But that's what I love. I love helping people. I love tangible, very specific recommendations that they implement. I love the other stuff, the nervous system stuff, the calming their fear about money and getting into some of their childhood stuff. I'm also involved in nonprofits and sit on a board, for homeless youth. And so across the board in all categories, I help people. I'm the mother of 6 children, but only the birth mother to one. I'm literally that person in every category of my life. And that's to me, that's what matters is just, creating that legacy. They'll miss me when I'm gone, growing, growing my book the right way with clients who I really like. When they call me, I'm excited to actually see their name on my phone. If I'm not,
Yeah.
there's a problem. And I really
Yeah.
want to talk to them and they want to talk to me. And that's, I just love that energy, you know.
We're absolutely going to do a part two with your marketing strategy because and I want all of you listening to this to come listen to that one too, because how Suzanne also decided, it wasn't just a decision, it was also a calling, like how you were kind of called to work with these women and help them. And it's something that I think a lot of us can relate to, that this isn't always a linear process. Like we feel called to certain things and it just lined up beautifully. So Suzanne, thank you for all the wisdom that
Thank you.
you share with us here and that you share with us all the time in the trust. I know you're coming to the summer mastermind. We're going to have so much fun in Newport Beach. That's in just,
Now I'm
is it like
excited.
in 2 weeks, like 3 weeks? It's coming right up. So once we get through May's nuts, right? End of school. Oh my gosh, everything going on. Then June, I'm so excited to be with you and all the amazing ladies there. And ladies, there's still time to join us. If you run a business over $1 million in annual revenue a year, please reach out. We're happy to talk with you. Even if you're not there yet, get to know us more because we're going to set the intention. You'll be here very soon with us. Okay. Have a great day. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Subscribe now to the Reward Podcast to be sure to not miss an episode. And don't forget to visit jointhetrust.org to learn more about our modern community for forward-thinking 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. You can learn more, apply to join us, or refer another woman you know who is over the $1 million mark and is ready for a different type of women's network. We have events coming up both live and online that are truly creating new possibilities for female leaders. That's jointhetrust.org. See you there.